Welcome to the Rhode Island Clinical Educator Development Module 3, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging in Educator Preparation. These modules were funded with a grant from the Collaboration for Effective Educator Development, Accountability, and Reform, and the Rhode Island Cedar State Leadership Team. This module series was created during the statewide shift from student teaching to residency. In these modules, you will hear the term student teaching only. Please understand that the information shared in these modules is applicable to all final full-time field experiences of educator preparation programs, including student teaching, residency, and final internships. You will see these two graphics periodically. When you see the stop sign, that is an indication that we would like you to pause the video and reflect on the concept being discussed. When you see the toolkit sign, that means there is an accompanying resource that will support you in your work with student teachers. This is Module 3, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging in Educator Preparation. Other modules in this series include Module 1, The Basics of Being a Clinical Educator, and Module 2, Coaching to Bring Out the Best in Your Student Teacher. There will be a brief survey for you to complete at the end of this module. We appreciate any feedback and reflection that you are able to provide. These modules are designed as a baseline training for teachers who would like to host candidates from any educator preparation program, but are not designed to replace any training that individual universities may require or provide. This general information module encompasses policies and procedures from all educator preparation programs in Rhode Island. You can find program-specific information through your candidate and their university supervisor. Each program runs a bit differently, but there are some commonalities that are useful to know regardless of what program or university you are working with. Thank you for watching. We hope this video is helpful to you as you start your journey as a clinical educator. When we talk about equity, what we mean is providing what students need to remove barriers and create the same access, opportunities, and outcomes for all that advantaged students enjoy. Equity differs from equality, wherein everyone is treated equally regardless of their need and/or barriers they face. When we talk about inclusion, we mean a service delivery model in which students with identified disabilities are educated in the general education setting with their age group or grade level peers. Although often used interchangeably, inclusion is not synonymous with the term least restrictive environment. It also is not synonymous with access to the general education curriculum. For the purposes of this video, we are not limiting the conversation around inclusion to only a discussion of the special education service delivery model. We also intend for this module to address inclusion in a more general sense. How is each and every student included in your classroom? When we talk about belonging, we mean the extent to which students feel that they are valued, visible, and heard members of their school's community. When we talk about diversity, we mean the people who make up a community, with all of their various attributes, including ethnicity, race, life experiences, gender, religion, sexual orientation, and so on. Diversity celebrates these various attributes as strengthening the community. When we talk about justice, we mean the equitable treatment of all members of society with regard to a specified issue, including but not limited to the distribution of resources and participation in decision-making. In this module, we are referring to educational and social justice. Cultural competence is having an awareness of one's own identity, holding asset-based views about differences and the ability to learn, building on the varying cultural and community norms of students and their families. Cultural competence is the ability to understand the within-group differences that make each student unique while celebrating the between-group variations that make our country a tapestry. When we say each and every versus all, we mean moving from a lens of meeting the needs of all students to meeting the needs of each and every student to ensure that students are seen as individuals with specific needs, experiences, strengths, and challenges. Here are a few local educators talking about meeting the needs of each and every student in their classrooms.
I believe that it is important to consider primarily each and every student above all students when teaching. I think that is a belief of mine, a value of mine in teaching, and that is something that I take with me every day in the classroom. It's important to recognize the multiple styles of learning. Every child is different, comes from different background, different walks of life. And as a teacher, we need to consider that. They are people, they are humans, and we need to take that into our instruction as well. How can we teach to different kinds of people, different learners, different styles? So I think that as a teacher, as an aspiring teacher, that's a really important value to remember.
We often use this analogy about sneakers, right? Or shoes. Equality is everybody having a pair of shoes. Enid Lee is the person who coined this, but we talk about everybody having a pair of shoes is equality. But equity is everybody having the right pair of shoes that fits, or the shoe that they need to do their best. And so educational equity is no different. We're saying that students or learners deserve to have what will meet their needs in order for them to be successful. And so if we can focus a student's experience or a learner's experience around their voice, what it is that they need, how do we engage with them or their families to support their growth, and so that they can be strong, productive members of a functioning society in a way that is meaningful to them and us, right? We want people to thrive when they have learning experiences that match their needs. That's what can happen.
The terms that we have reviewed are basic in definition, but very complex in practice. Our intention in this module is to offer you opportunities to explore how you would begin to talk about these concepts with your student teacher to the ultimate result of your student's success. Now we offer a few prompts or topics for you to think about in your preparation for these conversations. We will ask you to think about how you can model reflecting on your own position in the world, encourage student teachers to get to know each and every student, model thorough and efficient communication with parents and the community, and model how you would implement and sustain culturally relevant strategies. While we offer some initial ideas to explore in your own practice as you work with student teachers, this module cannot fully address all of the important topics and facets of equity, inclusion, and belonging. We encourage you to continue your understanding of these topics with the resources offered in the accompanying toolkit. In this module, we will discuss 4 big ideas for you to reflect on. First, we will ask you to think about modeling how you reflect on your own position in the world. Then, we offer the opportunity for you to think about how you will support student teachers in getting to know your students, working with families and communities, and choosing and using culturally responsive materials to create a culturally sustaining classroom environment. Modeling how you reflect on your own position in the world. Everyone has their own story. The richness in life is how we intersect with people and their stories. Knowing yourself is knowing your story and finding ways to connect your story with the stories of other people, including your students. The first step for your student teachers in becoming culturally competent is recognizing how their own cultural background impacts how and what they teach and assess, how they interact with students, and how they communicate. Modeling how you reflect on your cultural background to think about how and what you teach will help student teachers on their own journey to becoming more culturally competent. Understanding the role of learning and cultural differences in the classroom will help your student teacher become better at working with each and every student. Let's hear from some teachers on how they reflect on their own positionality.
Anytime I find myself thinking, this is the way the world is, I have to ask myself, why? Why is the world like that, and why do I think that's the way it is? And what assumptions are showing up? This is what matters. This is what's important about work. I've unpacked that for myself a lot over my whole career. A challenge that teacher candidates have around culturally responsive teaching is they're drawing a lot on their own experience. Sometimes that personal experience includes their experience as a person of color who's experienced schooling that may have been harmful or not respectful of who they are and what they bring to the classroom. Sometimes they're really aware that their personal experience is also limited. They may have not been at a diverse school. They may have had a white upbringing and a white experience in a white classroom that didn't give them exposure and opportunity to learn from and with people who are different than them.
When we are trying to support student teachers in their placements, particularly, we have to start with asking them to examine their own identities. I think that that's a big part of the work. And it's hard to do, so I think that as clinical educators, that first means we have to do it ourselves. And if we're prepared to have those challenging conversations around colleagues, it creates a sense of belonging and normalizes some of the challenging conversations that happen in education spaces or in community spaces.
I think clinical educators can really support teacher candidates in their culturally responsive practices by being a reflective partner through, after, and even during, if need be, interactions with students, with families, with other faculty members. Opportunities to say, hey, I noticed you said this, and I want to invite you into another way of saying that.
As a person of color, I think it becomes a little bit easier because people can see me, the kids can see me, and so naturally I have discussions, and social studies lends to it as well, about diversity, about different perspectives, and trying to understand people and being patient with differences amongst people. So I do that, I think, naturally in class, and I hope the student teacher will do that as well. I like to have those discussions in the classroom and in our debriefing. Doing
the work as clinical educators, as people, right? Examining our own biases, figuring out, what does diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and justice mean to us? So we can then help inform student teachers through lived experiences, right? Because that's what learning is really about, in my opinion.
Encourage your student teacher to know their story, know their students, navigate beyond their own positionality to connect with students and their families. Consider their own positionality in how they make choices about curriculum and communication. Press pause and reflect. How can you share your own journey toward understanding your story and how it contributes to cultural competence? Think of 2 or 3 examples to share with your student teacher. Encourage and facilitate your student teacher getting to know your students as individuals. Share and read all educational plans, including PLPs, IEPs, 504s, etc. Create opportunities for your student teacher to do getting to know you activities with students, including seeing them in a variety of settings. Encourage student teachers to understand the context of families and students, particularly when issues arise. Redirect conversations around families, students, and aspects of communities to be from an asset frame, as opposed to a deficit frame. Encourage student teachers to actively monitor SEL by interacting with students daily to find out where they are and how they are. Let's listen to some educators talking about getting to know students as individuals and building relationships with students and families.
I think what I learned most from student teaching is the significance of building relationships with your students and really getting to know them. You can't implement any form of classroom management. You can't really engage your students until you know them, and they not only trust you, but they respect you, and they know that you respect them and recognize their strengths and their needs and their unique abilities.
If we can support learners in ways that individualize their experience, that's critical. Like, I want to know that a student has the ability to be successful, that they feel like they belong, right? That there is this level of inclusion that exists for them, instead of othering, right?
We're going to be providing the conditions for all of our students to be successful. But how I get there, how you get there, the supports that you come into the classroom with, those that maybe I don't have, that's where that differentiation piece comes. That's where that personalization piece comes in. So for us, it's how do you support all students, high expectations for all students, empower all students. But how Johnny gets there and how Susie gets there are going to be totally different. And what that means is you have to really get to know them.
My clinical educator really emphasized the significance of recognizing each student's strengths and needs as a way to build my instruction and my pedagogy as a teacher, and including culturally responsive practices in my teaching. She really pushed me to build those relationships with students, to get to know them on a deeper level, to talk to their parents, to find out what they were interested in, what kind of communities and environments they're a part of in their daily life. And that really drives the instruction when you have that relationship with your students.
Encourage your student teacher to share educational plans, create opportunities for getting to know you activities with students, consider individual students' needs and interests when planning lessons, understand specific contexts of families and students, use an asset-based lens, incorporate social-emotional learning. Press pause and reflect. How do you get to know students as individuals? How does your classroom community come together so that each student feels like they belong? How can you create space for student teachers to practice this? Student teachers need to know how to work effectively and positively with families and communities. Encourage student teachers' participation in school and community activities outside of your classroom. Share your strategies and preferences for communicating consistently and positively with families. Provide information on district, school, and/or team policies or norms around family and community engagement. Encourage flexibility and avoid making assumptions about family involvement. Here are some local educators talking about positive and effective working relationships with families and communities.
Teacher candidates I've talked to have often articulated that a challenge they face as they're entering their student teaching and their first years in the career are their lack of experience dealing with families. They haven't had opportunities to talk with families, to understand families, to find ways of communicating with families that work. And that's an important part of culturally responsive practices, to make sure that families feel seen, heard, and respected as a part of the child's team in their education. So they need those opportunities to hear you on a parent phone call, to sit with you at a parent conference, to write letters home, to send those positive notes home that get parents on our team. They need the chance to see those sorts of things.
Engage as soon as you can. Try to meet the community, know your families, communicate with them. Again, with respect, with humility, and with compassion, particularly if they are very different from you, because that will allow you to open up a conversation and a dialogue of how to help your students. And when you talk to them, always ask them what they already are doing, first and for all, because they all want the best. So ask what they already are doing to help their kid. Then you ask them, what do they need from you and from the school in order to do more for their kids? And then you share with them. Share, don't say, don't demand. Share with them what you wish that they can do also to help you. And if you engage them respectfully in that conversation, they're going to respond positively to you.
Encourage your student teacher to participate in school and community activities, develop strategies for positive communication, follow the school's norms for family and community engagement, be flexible. Press pause and reflect. How did you come to find a comfortable structure for positively and consistently working with families in your community? What specific information would you like to share with your student teacher about your current school and district community? Model how you choose and implement culturally responsive materials and culturally sustaining curriculum. Student teachers need to understand how to choose and use culturally responsive materials to create a culturally sustaining classroom environment. Encourage your student teacher to critically evaluate curriculum and assessments for issues of equity, inclusion, diversity, justice, and belonging. Encourage your student teacher to modify materials to reflect and engage with students' interests, backgrounds, etc. whenever possible. Here is what educators have to say about culturally responsive materials, curriculum, and methods.
I think the biggest thing I wish that teachers and teacher candidates understood about culturally responsive teaching is all the many things that are part of culture. Dr. James Banks talked about it being so much more than heroes and holidays, and we need to push beyond that. We need to understand that we, each of us, have a culture, and that includes our values and how we approach conflict and how we view collaboration and how we view success and failure and leadership and all those things that are that you may not be able to see how your own culture influences how you view the world and how you view what matters. Understanding that means that you're able to unpack the practices that happen inside and outside your classroom walls to see how culture may be stepping in to shape a worldview or an idea of what's important. So I wish we understood that we have a culture too, and it may step in and show up in our interactions with our students.
Teachers need to be aware of the students that are in front of them, and only then can they become culturally responsive and aware of, how to approach that particular class. Every class is different demographics, and being aware of that as a teacher can help you begin to formulate lessons and such that help students see their face in your lesson. By looking at the sources, the materials that they're using, those type of things in history class, we're able to then kind of look at, well, is this the best option in making sure we are being, culturally sensitive? Are we making the best choices? Is this the best representation?
As I prepare for class, I don't need to prepare facts, but sometimes I have to go anticipate what type of questions the students might ask me, and so I have to go and do a little research in that. If you don't anticipate the questions, don't try to put one over on them and just tell them you don't know. And then maybe what you can do is work together with them. One of the wonderful things about classes today is that they have all of these devices, well, good and bad. But sometimes I'll just ask, hey, let's look that up. Let's go and find it.
And making students, strong digital citizens and being digitally literate starts with us. And so to make sure that when we're working and planning in that planning stage of units or lessons, that we are, I'm reinforcing that idea. Well, where'd you get that source from? Why would you use this one over this one? And having them to think through that process, which then allows them, am I using the best materials to teach my lesson? And I think by going through that process, it allows them to realize I'm making the best choices to present to my students the best information.
This is not something that comes out of a checklist. I'm going to do A, B, and C, but become a way of being. That every time that they look at the curriculum, they look at it critically. So that's what I want them to model to my students.
Encourage your student teacher to critically evaluate curriculum and assessments for issues of equity, inclusion, diversity, justice, and belonging. Modify materials and classroom procedures to reflect and engage with students' interests, backgrounds, etc. whenever possible. Press pause and reflect. What do culturally responsive and sustaining curriculum and procedures look like in your classroom? How will you make this visible and explicit for your student teacher? This module focused on topics around equity, belonging, inclusion, diversity, justice, and cultural competence. Additionally, we discussed a familiar concept with a new term, the idea of supporting each and every student versus all students. We respectfully acknowledge that this module cannot fully address all of the important facets of these topics. We encourage you to use this module as a starting off point for your thinking. Make sure to visit the website for the Module 3 Toolkit, which includes the glossary of terms, list of additional resources, and our 4 big ideas. Please complete our brief survey to provide feedback on this module and the first 2 modules. Your thoughts and insights will inform the work that we do in the future. If you're interested in becoming a clinical educator, contact your principal or district administrator to find out how your school or district assigns clinical educators. When you are assigned as a clinical educator, the University Teacher Prep Program will provide additional guidance, information, and resources. See the Rhode Island Statewide Partnership Agreement for the characteristics and requirements of good clinical educators.